Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. About to begin. I can't wait to introduce my guest today. He's an absolute genius, badass marketing leader, thought leader, full stack, and GTM and technology all just smushing together. He was actually considered or heralded as a top 40 ABM Superhero by Terminus. He's actually been in a lot of Flip My Funnel events, great events if you've ever had a chance to go to those. He's a guest lecturer, USC Marshall School of Business. My God, Casey, who do we have on today? A marketing advisor to the stars, co-founder and CEO of RevOptica, and head of growth at Mucker Capital, Tony Yang. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Casey. Just for the record, for the listeners, I am not paying Casey to say any of that.
Not yet, Tony. Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. But thank you for the warm welcome, for the generous intro. Thank you.
Sure, man. Your power tip, you can clip that and make that your wake up alarm in the morning, Ladies and gentlemen.
Now get my day started for sure.
Exactly. So, hey, I can't wait to learn from you. So I want to go ahead and pass you this thing. It's heavy, but I know you work out. Here it comes. Ugh. Okay. All right. Go ahead and grab that. Thor's hammer.
Okay.
You got it? Okay. Okay. Take Thor's hammer and smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Set the record straight once and for all.
Okay. Hopefully I'm worthy to pick it up. Worthy enough.
You are worthy.
Okay. Well, so you and I have chatted a couple times before actually hopping on this official show. And something that's been on my mind quite a bit in the last several years is the concept of the buyer journey. So in terms of a myth, and this is what I see time and time again, even before my current day job as head of growth for Mucker, which basically means I advise our portfolio companies on growth. One of these myths that's been floating around, especially in the B2B marketing and sales world, is the notion of the sales and marketing funnel being representative of your buyer's journey, especially in B2B, or the assumption that it's representative of your buyer's journey. And I think that is oftentimes not the case. Not to say that it's not something we want to strive towards, but in the application and execution of how we go to market, a lot of times there's a confusion between those two. And that results in a ton of problems, just both from my own experience and also as I'm working with a lot of different startups, particularly in their go-to-market.
What happens when you confuse the two, when you confuse the journey and the funnel?
Yeah, that's a great question. To give you a quick answer, I think a symptom of where the buyer journey in a funnel is not in alignment, which is often the case, are low conversion rates through how you measure the funnel. And so let me back up a little bit and let me explain what I mean by the buyer journey for our listeners. Okay, so
yeah, please.
I'm assuming that all the listeners who've been listening to the show for a long time had a lot of great guests, a lot of B2B go-to-market experts. So the notion of the funnel is not new to most of the listeners, right? There's different variations of the funnel, serious decisions, introduce all these different versions of it through many years, but by and large, a lot of companies today still utilize a very similar approach in terms of defining the funnel, like MQL, marketing qualified lead, which we'll talk about in a second. Another kind of myth that's related to this whole concept of buyer journey. But MQL, SQL, sales qualified leads, or sales accepted lead, and then you've got different stages of a potential sales deal or opportunity, right? And that's great for measuring progress in terms of a marketing and sales process, but we cannot kind of confuse the two between that and how your buyers are actually making a decision. In an ideal world, those two things would be aligned. Okay. but it's not, we don't live in an ideal world unless we build for it. Um, the symptoms of not having the buyer journey in your funnel in alignment are low conversion rate. I'll just give you a quick example. Um, Many companies that I worked with in the past as an in-house go-to-market leader, and also when I do consulting or advising, is as an example, a B2B SaaS company. A common approach is offering or getting to a demo or some sort of a booked appointment or a meeting,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Get them on the phone, show them the product.
Exactly, right? And, typically that's done by, let's say, an in-house SDR team or BDR team where they go and whether they do outbound or inbound, that's a whole nother set of a discussion and myths. We could go in a wild tangent. I got really strong opinions about that. But, a common occurrence is that I've seen when a meeting is booked and the prospect shows up, and let's just say the account executive, the AE who's running the first discovery call or the demo, at the end of the call, seems like it went well. The prospect is engaged, asked a lot of questions, and was really involved in the demo process. And then at the end of the call, the sales rep asked, "Hey, okay, what is it? Sounds like it. This might be what you're looking for. Let's set up the next step and reconvene a week from now." And then the prospect goes, "Okay, well, it looks all very interesting, but why don't you pay me back in 6 months? Cause we've got other things on our plate." Right. And
Much
right,
later.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that happens quite a bit, and,
Right.
I think that's an example of the buyer journey, that particular buyer's, where they are in the buying process is not aligned with where the seller is. Cause,
Mm.
there's a lot of things that perhaps the seller or sorry, the buyer, may not have, been convinced of. Certainly not urgency, because otherwise, why would they say, "Hey, reach back out to me in 6 months"? There's no urgency involved on the buyer's end, right? So, this whole notion of the buyer's journey is, in my, how I look at it is how the buyers and the prospects make their decisions in their journey to evaluate solutions and ultimately buy from you, right? And there's a lot of different frameworks out there. If you get to know me, I'm a big frameworks guy just because I don't like reinventing a
Sure.
wheel that's already been invented. There's certain frameworks out there that perhaps many of us may have heard of or are familiar with, like ADA, awareness, interest, desire, action, the acronym. I don't particularly like that one just because it's not as prescriptive as the one that I typically use. There's other ones out there. There's studies. I think there's one similar type of concept around, you know, um, uh, problem aware, solution aware. That's part of the like a consumer decision making process. The concept is exactly that. How do buyers make decisions? And it's not necessarily a linear progression per se, but it's understanding the different aspects of how they make decisions in each of those stages. The one that I turn to a lot is one that was introduced by Serious Decisions many years ago before they got acquired by Gartner. I think they're with Gartner these days. Many years ago, I was fortunate enough to be a client of theirs under the product marketing practice. And so I learned a lot of this stuff. So I'm not making any of this up. Um, I don't know if they're still um, actively teaching or advising companies with this particular framework, but I still use it to this day to teach others.
Sure.
And it's a 6-stage process or a 6-stage buyer decision framework. And I could go through each of them really quickly. Um,
Yeah.
First one,
Please do.
yeah, the first one is loosening the status quo. That's stage number one. And that really, to me, is about not selling your solution, but really convincing the buyer that the status quo needs to change, either by highlighting a pain point or a challenge that matters to them specifically, or, in the concept of, category creation or, new world, old world type of storytelling. I'm a big fan of Andy Raskin. If you're familiar with this stuff,
Totally.
right? Like the greatest sales pitch or deck ever seen, referring to Quora. And then they did a follow on thing with Drift, painting a picture of before and after, current world, you live in it. It's terrible. This is what happens if you stay there. New World is much better with, not Quora, Zora. Sorry, I misspoke. Zora being the
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
subscription management, and even Drip, right? Like Drip, they changed their storytelling a little bit in a couple of years ago, but they were all around conversational marketing, right? So, and they were telling the narrative of how today it's not about static forms, it's about prospects wanting a conversation. That's their story. That's their new world versus the old world, right? And so the whole concept of loosening a status quo is not selling, hey, we are a chatbot. Boring, right? Um,
Yeah.
but the selling around the need or the pain point, or the new world. And so that as a first stage of this framework that I use from serious decision, stage one, loosening the status quo, stage two being exploring possible solutions. And to me, that stage is about, okay, if they're convinced of the need to loosen the status quo or change their status quo, now it's about why now. Committing to change, jumping ahead, committing to change is the second stage. And committing to change just is essentially around convincing them of the urgency. Why now and not 6 months from now? Okay. So, like it's all about the why. These first two stages are about the why. It's not about the what or the how.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned Andy Raskin as someone I look to for inspiration. Another one, Simon Sinek. People have mixed feelings about him,
Sure.
but he has a YouTube
Start with
video,
why.
right? Start with why. The book. There's a YouTube video I watch almost every year just as a refresher. The circles, right? Like gets to why,
Yep.
like why is being in the middle, how and
Golden
what golden
circles.
circle.
Yeah.
Exactly. And past I would make my teams watch it every year with me. But that's about, the why. The 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 need to change and the why you need to change now. And then the next stage being exploring possible solution. At that point, once a buyer is convinced that the status quo needs to change because it's painful, bad things are going to happen if you want to take that approach, um, or like here's a new world, there's a better place for you to be in, and why now? Then you start going into, okay, well, what are the ways that we can look into to solve for this need? Exploring possible solution. That's a stage three. That's when they're a buyer or prospect is more receptive to very salesy call to actions, right? Like I'm sure you get this today, and I still do messages from sellers, from SDRs,
Hmm.
core SDRs that are tasked with trying to set meetings, right? They send me
Yeah.
messages every day. You get them too, probably on
Sure.
on LinkedIn, saying, "Hey, my
Totally.
name is so and so. I work at this company. We do this." And then they maybe name drop a handful of flagship customers, and then they go straight for the kill and say, "Hey, what does your schedule look like tomorrow for a 30-minute call?" Which usually is like an hour, and they're trying to qualify me, and they have no notion of what it is that's on top of my mind that's keeping me up at night.
Right.
And it's very seller focused, right? That's the whole thing with the funnel. It's very focused from a company selling point of view. That's okay. You still need that to manage your sales process, and to forecast success, and to see how you can hit your numbers and look for waste optimization.
Sure.
But you can't confuse that with how your buyers are going about their decision making process. And so, kind of in that quick example with sellers trying to reach out to us with these very salesy messages, call to action, I'm not going to respond. I bet you're not going to respond because we don't have the time of day to take 5 demos every single day and say
No.
yes to these people if it's not top of mind for us, right? You
Tony, do you know what I do? Do you know what I do to these guys on
what's that?
LinkedIn? I pitch them back.
That's it.
And then I try to get them on a call,
Yeah,
which confuses them completely because they're trying to get me on a call,
yeah,
but now I'm trying to get them on a call, and then they typically say no, which is funny because it would have been the same phone call, but
exactly.
yeah, a
Right.
little bit of fun.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, it's
But
ridiculous, right?
yeah.
And I wonder, the explore possible solutions. It's not just your own solution. You're saying, okay, you want to change this problem, you could do it yourself. You could roll up your sleeves. You could hire this
Yep.
other agency. You could, here's some options for you. And None of them are probably as good as this option, but let's compare.
Yeah, yeah. And at this point, it's when the buyer is in this stage, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you as a seller, And there's
Smart,
there's if you have
smart.
to recognize and understand that because there's all this talk in various B2B marketing and sales bubbles and echo chambers, if you will, talks about things like the dark funnel. A lot of people are talking about the dark funnel,
Yeah,
which is really what you don't see as you or I, if we're looking for a particular solution. Maybe we're asking our friends or coworkers or colleagues, hey, I have this
yeah,
need. What are you doing about it? Right? And yeah, that's real. But you have to recognize that as a seller of a particular solution at your company. You got to
yeah,
recognize the whole point of the buyer journey is understanding where the buyer is in terms of the decision making process, right? And so the reason why we don't respond to messaging like that is because we haven't been convinced of a different status quo that needs to change and the urgency. Maybe we do have a need, but the seller is making us connect the dots. That's one of the things around messaging that can be a result of understanding the buyer journey. Or if someone who does respond to a message like that, the seller just got lucky, like, oh, I, I,
right,
I happen to be actually evaluating a solution for this topic or to solve for this. And you just happen to reach out to me at the right time. But
right.
luck is not a strategy. It's not scalable. Um, so
Yeah, no, for sure.
yeah. So anyway, so I mentioned stage number 3,
Yep.
exploring possible solutions. Number 4 is committing to a solution. And generally speaking, these two stages, the first two being convincing of the why, loosening the status quo. It's about educating on the pain or old world versus new world. Second one around, committing to that change is about urgency. At that point, that's where a prospect is now ready to explore possible solutions as stage number 3. And they could be, like to your point, trying to address it through various means. Do we build some sort of internal solution ourselves or address it through
Sure.
new workflows, hiring people or what have you, right? Or do I go find, off the shelf software or other products that may be available in the market? Or I go hire someone like an agency or whatever to complete a particular job, right? They're exploring all these possible solutions to look for the best fit. And then at some point in their evaluation process, that's where they commit to a solution. Perhaps even shortlisting a set of potential alternatives, options. And that's essentially the 4th stage, committing to a solution, right? Exploring possible solutions. And then after you do a bunch of evaluation against your needs, you start committing to a solution. Generally speaking, most companies and sales organizations that are, a little bit more mature, they're okay from that point on. I don't want to say okay because there's still a lot of needs that can be addressed in terms of optimizing a sales process. But I think
Yeah.
when a prospect hit that point of exploring possible solutions and committing to a solution, and they've been convinced of the why, usually a good sales team or sales organization can move the ball forward with that prospect. Committing to solutions about, how do you then differentiate? Well, why is Drip better than Intercom or, these other tools out there, or building it yourself, right? Um, and then the
Yeah.
last two stages, again, is very much in line with the existing sales processes with stage number 5, justifying the decision, making the buyer or prospect feel good about, saying, yes, I have a contract in front of me. What's going to make me feel good about signing that contract? And then stage 6 is making the selection. And at this point, usually a lot of buyers are looking for things like social proof, looking for ROI, guarantees, or at least some level of benchmark or understanding. It could be, social proof in terms of not just customers, but also, there was an analyst report, a lot of especially B2B SaaS companies, they love to try to get on, let's say, Forrester Wave or Gartner Magic Quadrant. Well, most of the time,
Yep.
prospects don't care about that, but it could help if, you're at the finish line and they're trying to evaluate between you and this other company, and assuming all the other check marks or check boxes are checked off, that kind of asset, as an example, will help the buyer justify their decision-making process in terms of selecting you versus another prospect. But essentially, to back up, I think the biggest challenge is really getting to understand the beginning parts of the buyer journey and convincing them of the
Right.
why. A lot of times, many companies miss that, and they just jump straight
Right.
to selling or pitching their company. And I find myself teaching a lot of founders, to there's a time and place for that, but it's not all the time. And to teach them the other side, of the spectrum.
And isn't that because, as much as we might have an arch nemesis as a competitor, really status quo is the number one competitor. Just
Yeah,
do nothing. I'll just,
absolutely.
this sounds great and I'll do it later.
Yeah,
I'm just not going to do it.
absolutely. And I think that's a really great point because being on the selling side before and being a marketer, we're almost trained to think, okay, how do we position ourselves better than our next closest competitor? But you're right, Casey, because like one of the biggest competitors is the status quo, do nothing. And yes, that sometimes isn't necessarily an option for the prospect if they are aware of a problem and they, are convinced that they need to address it. Maybe they don't know where to look, right? But still, you can never really go wrong. This is what I tell a lot of the companies that advise these days. You can't go wrong by continuing to sell the why or the whole new world, old world narrative. Because at the very least, if you have someone who's actually in market and have already been convinced of those things, you're still demonstrating that you're an expert in that space or that need or category. Right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Man. So, lining this up, I see it solving so many problems before they happen. But what would you say is a current challenge you're facing right now, or you're seeing with a lot of the groups that you advise?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that it is a lot of work, meaning going back to the basics of marketing and sales 101. It's not necessarily about understanding what you do and sell, but it's about understanding your market, right? And so even before introducing this concept of a buyer's journey, and again, like I'm a fan of this model from Serious Decisions. There's plenty of models out there, but the whole point is understanding from a buyer's perspective how they go about making decisions. And so, regardless of what model or framework you use to understand the buyer journey, you still need to understand your buyer. And so, I find myself in my day job as the advisor at this VC firm, Mucker Capital, working with our portcos. And a lot of times I'm working with very early stage, Series A and earlier seed stage companies, where a lot of it is founder led sales. One of the founders, so the business, quote unquote, business founder is doing all the sales and
Yeah.
marketing and all that stuff, right? And they're not naturally experienced in that because, maybe they're experienced in their particular industry or vertical or market, but
Right.
maybe they never really held a sales job or marketing job. And so to kind of teach them and reframe their way of thinking, yes, they have to think about the product as CEO, put on their CEO hat. But if they are engaging with the market, especially early stage, you're still learning. And so how do you go about defining and validating your ICP, your ideal customer profile? In B2B, I work with a lot of B2B companies. We do have consumer facing tech in our portfolio, but a lot of them are B2B. And so in that kind of context, ICP to me is about the type of company or organization that makes one type of organization a better fit than another, right? And it could go beyond just your standard, enterprise versus S&B. Well, how do you define that? Is it number of employees? Is it amount of revenue? Or is it how big is your typical deal size that you're talking about? Are you selling $200 a month subscriptions to, a GE? Or are you
Right.
selling, um, 6, 7 figure contracts? Which case that's a different approach, right? So, but understanding your ICP is absolutely very critical. Defining what good looks like in terms of an ideal customer, not necessarily for you, but the pain point that a particular customer set is experiencing that you could solve for, right? Up at a company
Yeah.
level. And then obviously, we, even though we sell to in B2B, we sell to companies, but we're engaging with people. And so, the personas, and that's, we talk a lot about it, but really defining the personas in terms of the different types of people and how they take part in the decision making process. Right? There's a bunch of materials out there that educate people around. Well, who is the economic buyer, or who's the end user, or who's the main decision maker, or another term
Right.
that I've heard is like a ratifier or gatekeeper, people, let's say in legal or procurement, that have nothing to do with solving the pain point that you're solving for, but they're part of the process in terms of evaluation in deciding whether or not to bring the solution on board, right? So understanding all these key personas, their roles in the decision-making process, their motivations, and their individual needs or pain points, understanding that will help inform how you think about the buyer journey and where they partake in the decision making process. Kind of like I said before, those in legal, they're not going to be at the beginning of the discussion in terms of
Right.
evaluation, but they have their own journey to go through. Meaning, if I'm a legal counsel for a particular company, we're evaluating cybersecurity software, right? I got to make sure that these the solution is not going to put our company at risk with the contract that we sign, data privacy and all that stuff. That's specific needs that I have if I were the legal counsel. Right. And so you got to understand that to help bring me through my own journey as that role or persona to make me feel good about this particular decision we're about to make. Um, so yeah, so I'd say the biggest challenge, as sort of a long-winded answer to your question, is that it's really hard work. There's no easy way to go about it. It's rolling up your sleeves, defining your ICP and personas, and it's not just an exercise you just create like a poster you slap against the wall. It's really going deep, getting customer feedback or market feedback, doing customer discovery calls, and learning and really fine tuning your understanding of the market so that you can define, okay, this particular persona at this particular type of company, this is what they're going through when they're in the, loosening the status quo stage. They need to be convinced of this. They need to be educated of that in order for them to be moved from that stage to the next in order to, evaluate possible solution. So that's really the hardest part of this whole thing, for sure.
Yeah. It's there's no silver bullet. It's not like you just add this one piece of tech. It's that work. It's
Yeah.
that grind of really understanding what's going on. That makes total sense, man. My next question: who are you? Who are you? How do you know all these things? Right? Take me back.
Yeah.
Little Tony days. Did you know you're going to be advising startups and doing marketing for all these really big brands that a lot of us know and love? Like, take us back. What was it like?
Well, I mean, if you were to ask me if I would have guessed, then I'd be doing what I'm doing today. I would be no. um,
Right.
I mean, okay, so well, I'll just kind of go through high level. So, in undergrad, I studied economics.
Well, no. We're going deep,
Deep?
Tony. We're
You
going
want to go
deep.
way back?
Take us back. Little Tony days.
Little Tony. Okay. Well, I mean, how far back
You
you know?
playing soccer? What are you doing?
Oh, well, as a kid,
Playing golf?
no, I played a lot of, well, as a kid, I this was again, like I look a lot younger than I actually am. I was born in the '70s, just to give you an idea.
Nice.
And so this is way before social media, mobile devices, like
Right.
I grew up in that era where go outside, my mom would
Yeah.
say,
Go
go
play.
out, don't come back until 6 PM when it's dinner time, or they're not checking in on me, every hour, and we're left to our devices with, I mean, it doesn't sound great, but like, yeah, we had a bike.
Huh. How it was, man.
Yeah, exactly. Right around the neighborhood, find other kids. and, take jumps off of curbs and stuff like that and just have fun.
Oh,
Right.
nice.
But yeah, so, I grew up as a pretty, quiet kid and very studious kid, like a typical Asian American kid. I grew up in California in Los Angeles. I was born in Taiwan, but my family moved here when, I was about to start kindergarten. So I
Okay.
grew up near the Pasadena area, if you're familiar. Um,
Sure.
and, went through primary school, all through high school, went to college down here at UC San Diego, University of California, San Diego. So
Yeah,
I live
sure.
in San Diego these days. We moved here about 2 years ago, away from San Francisco, Silicon Valley area for 15 years there. Um, but I went to college there, studied economics and Chinese studies, met my future wife at college. Um, and
Isn't that what college is really all about,
of
right? That's
course,
how I met my future wife as
this is
well.
right, like economics, man. Um, yeah, so really quick kind of chronological story, if you will. I graduated with these, I guess you could say a double major. I thought I wanted to get into the legal industry, so I worked for a year at the San Diego District Attorney's Office and their
Wow.
child support enforcement bureau.
Oh
So
God.
totally unrelated. I did that for a year and thought this is not for me. I don't like sitting in a dreary, drab building, government building. Uh, and
Chasing down
right,
bad guys.
exactly.
Yeah. Geez.
Yeah, and that role, I mean, it was a first job out of college type of thing where I was essentially
Right.
working as a collections agent, collecting for child support, stuff like that. So, it's
Yeah.
it's exactly what you are thinking that it would be. And so it's not
Right.
very fun. And right around the time I was during the first tech boom, the internet tech boom. And I was like, oh, super interesting. I didn't study computer science. I kind of wish I had, but it's okay. And so I wanted to get in on that. So I went to grad school to study something related, information systems management. The next best. It's not
Okay.
necessarily software development or anything like that, but it's very kind of related. And then when I finished that degree, as luck would have it, the bubble burst. The first internet bubble burst. No jobs anywhere,
Jeez.
and
Oh man.
long story short, I moved overseas to Asia because my family had moved back to do a family business in real estate out in Beijing in China. This was like in the '90s or so, early 2000s. And so I moved back.
You were speaking Chinese at home, so it was like not too bad to be able to
Yeah.
go over
I
there.
mean,
Or?
even though I was born in Taiwan, and I won't go into this whole Taiwan China thing, it's a whole thing. Um, yeah,
You'll get the episode blocked
right.
on Spotify.
Yeah, that's for another podcast, I guess.
We
But
should talk about COVID while we're at it.
right.
Get it flagged for that
Yeah,
too. How about
exactly.
that?
No, but yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm more or less like what we call like an ABC, American born Chinese, where my primary language is English, but yeah, I did speak Chinese growing up, half and half, so to speak. And part of the reason why I also studied Chinese studies in undergrad was to kind of learn about my heritage and language and all that stuff. But essentially, I moved back overseas. My wife or girlfriend at the time had also moved to Asia because she was going to teach English at an international school. She ended up in Shanghai. I was in Beijing, which is basically a 2-hour flight. And I worked for. I ended up getting a job at IBM, little company
Wow.
called IBM. And that was my first job in tech and also in marketing. And kind of a fun fact: one of the the first project I worked on was helping to build a business case to establish at that time what they called an application service provider (ASP) offering, which is the
Sure.
precursor to SaaS today. Because application
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
it's basically hosted apps before cloud. Before cloud became a thing, there were these business parks where a lot of companies go and establish offices there, and so IBM had an offering where we had hosted software applications, productivity software or CRM or HR, whatever. I can't remember exactly that were hosted.
Sure.
And so that was sort of the beginnings of SaaS before SaaS became a thing. And so I guess you could say I've been in SaaS since the very inception or the very beginning. And yeah, that was a project. And then afterwards, my boss said, "Hey, Tony, you're going to do marketing now." Up to that point, I took one class in school on marketing, and I'm like, sure. And so that was getting my first exposure in marketing. And
Man.
fast forward a couple years, afterwards I left and um, came back to the States, got married, went to business school. I went to University of Southern California, USC, fight on, go Trojans. I drank the Kool-Aid there. And then afterwards, um, I started to work for startups in the
Okay.
San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley. And I'll tell you, like, obviously, we all know this now, but marketing at a company like IBM is so different than doing marketing at, my first startup experience was I was employee number 4. First marketing hire, we were about 600K ARR at that point, bootstrap company, which also meant that I had was very little budget as the marketing lead at the company to do marketing. And so that was a
Sure.
completely different experience than when I was quote unquote doing marketing for IBM, right? Not just in terms of budget, but how we think about and strategize going to market and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, so after I finished my MBA program, um, basically spent the next 15 years or so in Silicon Valley working for a lot of different startups. Um, I've
Man.
probably been a part of 6, 7 startups in-house. And, unfortunately, not all of them survived because not every startup succeeds. A couple of them, where we ran out of the runway, ran out of funding. And so we had to
Sure.
close up shop, not uncommon. That's the whole nature of startups. A few still operate to this day. And then there were a few that I was fortunate enough to be a part of, and they eventually got acquired. Um, the most notable one probably would be a company called Mintigo. It's a Sequoia Capital backed company in predictive analytics, predictive marketing. At the time, we competed against companies.
Pretty sure I got a Mintigo t-shirt or
I'm
socks
sure,
somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm sure you're familiar, but at the time, other players in the space were Lattice Engine, Sixth
Yeah.
Sense, Everstring, those guys. And yeah, I joined them early on and was with them for quite a bit of time. And then afterwards, I uh, joined another company and a couple of other companies afterwards, and eventually started doing my own consulting work, professional CMO, whatever you want to call it, because I just wanted to see what it's like to work for myself, even though
Makes
that's
sense.
not really the case because when you're a consultant, you have multiple bosses. um, and then, and then just about a year ago, I joined this VC firm called Mucker Capital as their in-house growth advisor, which just basically means I get to work with all of our, not all, because we have over 400 in our portfolio because the VC firm has been around for a dozen years, 13, 14 years or so. Those that we invested in, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, they've already progressed. They don't need help from me. They already have their own go-to-market team, CMO, CRO, whatever. I tend to spend most of my time with the earlier stage companies, those that are still either pre-revenue or have scaled to some level of ARR, but were pretty much very founder-led driven activities. And so they're trying to figure out how do we scale this thing? How do we get from, 500K ARR to a million and then to 5 million and then to 10 million? So that's
Yeah.
essentially my day job where I advise these companies on how to do that. And every company is different. We have a lot of B2B SaaS, but even B2B SaaS is, such a widespread category. There's vertical based SaaS. We have companies focused on, let's say, construction management or the CPA firm. And then we've got more horizontal type of applications. we've got enterprise software, selling, 6-figure type of deals to, small like very much PLG driven. Not to say PLG can't be used for enterprise. That's
Right.
another topic we could talk about at some point in the future. Um,
Right.
but yeah, so everything in between. And then we do have some consumer facing technology like fintech, healthcare, stuff like that. So that's my day job. And then in the beginning of this show, you also mentioned that I, on the side, sort of like a nights and weekends type of thing, I caught the whole startup bug years ago. So now I'm also starting my own startup with a couple of co-founders. We're all kind of moonlighting this, bootstrapping for as long as we can. And it's a company called RevOptica. And our main challenge that we're solving for is the notion of the buyer journey. So that's why I feel so strongly about it, is because, I've seen and experienced this challenge of understanding the buyer journey, even from my own needs and pain points, operating as a go-to-market person, marketing, sales, RevOps even. Um, and it's just been a challenge that I was never able to solve for efficiently when I was in-house. So that's a product that we're still in the process of building an initial minimal viable product MVP. Hopefully it'll be, available soon. But yeah, it's good times all around, lots of learning. Even though I'm advising a lot of these companies, I'm learning myself as,
Yeah.
a founder, but also I consider myself, like a lifelong learner. I'm not, contrary to your great intro for me, there's a lot of other really smart people that I learn from all the time. And, like part of the benefit of my job as an advisor at this VC firm is I learn from others and I kind of teach our portfolio companies. And not to say that I kind of claim all the credit for myself, no, but it's just part of the work where, oh yeah, if I'm not an expert on how to do, um, Shopify go to market, we have a couple of Shopify companies, okay, like companies built on Shopify.
Yeah.
Well, I've never really done that before, but let me go and just help you figure out. Right? There's certain concepts that can be applied across board, like buyer journey, but specific implementations for how you scale growth for a Shopify type of company. Well, let's work together. Let me go and find another resource, or here's what I learned in terms of best practices from a person who's done go to market for a long time. This is what I recommend after learning a little bit more about your industry or your market. So yeah, so that's sort of the gamut of
Dude.
my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it's you have been just so when you're working with startups and you're advising them, and this is not your first rodeo. You're actively doing it now. You're in the fight with them, and you've been in six other ones. So yeah, I could see how you could just have this wealth of knowledge. So my next question is a bit of a hypothetical question for you.
Okay.
Are you ready
Let's
for
do it.
this? All right. You see, Tony, I may have a time machine in New Hampshire. So let's say you come visit, right? Get some meetings in Boston with some Mucker folks, some investments and whatnot, and come visit me in New Hampshire, and we'll get some beer and some lobster, and then we'll go play with a time machine in the backyard, right?
Okay.
So it's covered in a tarp and acorns and stuff, and so we play on this time machine, and it goes back in time, and you get to visit yourself 4 days after you graduated with that undergrad, that economics and Chinese studies degree, right? You get to meet that version of
Uh-huh.
you and you can have a convo. You can have a conversation, talk to yourself and say anything you want. What would you tell yourself?
Other than go buy stock in Google and Netflix and Amazon. Geez.
Tesla and a
Right.
couple other
Exactly.
places. Yeah. Seriously.
What would I tell myself? I've never been a person who dwells on regret. It's just my nature. And so, there's nothing I would change per se about, my past. If anything, I kind of alluded to this before. Um, if anything, I would say maybe spend some time, more time on paying attention to classes like statistics or consider maybe uh, studying a little bit more computer science, mostly because that's like a lot of what I do today. And not to say that I'm
Yeah.
developing software and I don't think I would end up ever being a good software developer, but just kind of getting that understanding and hindsight would have helped in a lot of different ways. And certainly, as I'm thinking about, in the process of building my own company, yeah, I do have a CTO co-founder who's the builder. Um, and so like if I had studied computer science back then or, whatever, that probably would have made things a little bit easier or faster. But also kind of what I just mentioned, about studying statistics, um,
Right.
which is, a lot of what I've realized over the years. I didn't realize this as much early on in my marketing career, but certainly as I learned more about what I didn't know. Um, Understanding how to do marketing, growth, sales, whatever you want to call it, just growing a company, taking a data-driven approach is absolutely critical. There's a
Yeah.
funny saying that maybe you've heard of. A lot of companies think of the marketing department as the arts and crafts department, which is not necessarily. Like, there is art to it, and there's science. You have to have both, right? Uh,
Right.
Art,
Gotta have both.
yeah, like it's not just about pretty logos or cool design out of your next trade show booth or your website. That's all part of the work. But, one of the key things is understanding from a data perspective, what's working and what's not. And that's an age old problem. The whole topic of attribution is another one of those things. And one of the startups I worked at was an attribution company, um, focusing on selling attribution to consumer brands. And so I have a lot of opinions on attribution. Um, and I know you had guests in the past talking. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think going back and telling myself, maybe just pay a little bit more attention on some of these things and to kind of gain, a deeper understanding or skill set. I think that would have helped me make less mistakes throughout my career. Um, and yeah, that's just one of the things, um, learning from your own mistakes is a great way to learn, but also learning from others people's mistakes is a better way, so you don't, have to experience the pain point. Just throughout
Yeah.
my career, learned from both areas. Um, Certainly made my fair share of mistakes, but also why I consider myself a lifelong learner. Always trying to talk to other people who are smarter than me and subject matter experts is so that I can learn from them without having to go through, certain challenges and pain points to get to that point myself. So I hope that answers your question.
Makes sense. Yeah. No, a powerful answer. Do you think the young tones would listen?
I would think so. I was always a pretty,
Yes.
not a rebellious kid.
Right.
So,
It's me from the future.
right.
You just listen to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Might be a little bit of skepticism, but
Right. You have a little password. You're
right.
like, hey, remember that night on July? Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, how did you know
Right.
that? You are
Yep.
me. Awesome, man. Dude, well, where can people connect with you? They want to reach out, either connect with you, um,
Yeah.
all the different ways, right? Because of what you've said today, or Mucker, or
Yeah.
your app. Tell us where we can go.
Yeah. So the best way to reach me is probably through LinkedIn. I'm less active in terms of posting these days. This is something I keep reminding myself I should do more of, but there's just a lot of things that tends to take my focus. But yeah, LinkedIn. There's a lot of Tony Yangs out there. It's a pretty common name. So I've been using sort of like my I don't know what you call it, like an internet call sign for ever since college. It's Tones, TONES 810.
Okay.
And I use that for my LinkedIn, for my Twitter. I'm even less active on Twitter these days. But yeah, so certainly people could connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect, chat, and get to meet new people. Um, yeah, I mean, my role at Mucker, I'm not on the investment side. You could almost think of my role as sort of like customer success, where,
Yeah.
once a company signs a term sheet with us, then they get handed off to me and I work with them closely to make sure they grow. I mean, that's a very a simple way of looking at it. And so I get a lot of people find out that I work at this VC firm called Mucker Capital, and they're like, hey, here's our deck.
Give me some money.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Here's a deck.
that's cool. I'll try to point you guys in the right direction. But, if anybody who's looking for funding, just go to our website. There's ways to submit and pitch your company. But yeah, feel free to ping me.
Totally.
But yeah.
And once you get in, then you get to start working with you. So
exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. And then lastly, if people are interested in checking out this little startup I'm working on, again, we're very early stage. It's called RevOptica. And it's more focused on the initial use cases around uncovering the buyer journey. Not necessarily about the decision-making process, because that's a little bit hard to get into people's heads, but there are signals that you can look for. And that's one of the things that we're trying to uncover, which is trying to figure out, okay, all the things that are happening at this one particular account that you have to deal with, what is the life cycle or the lifespan? Actually, that's not the right word. All the things that happen with, maybe you're talking to 8 people at this particular company and they're evaluating a deal. What's everything that happened with these 8 people, with you, with your sales reps, with your marketing, over time? And so we're starting to build that. Again, this is just one of those things where it was a pain point that I've experienced. Now, I'm trying to build something to solve for that pain point because I couldn't find anything good in the market. So you can go check that out and reach out to me there as well.
Perfect, man. We'll put links in the show notes. People can click right through. They don't even have to type it out.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. I feel like we just got a master class in disrupting the idea of just nothing but the funnel, but really thinking about the buyer's journey. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you for having me, Casey. And thank you for the kind words. I hope you're not like overselling, but because I've listened to several episodes and you got some, great people, have had some great people in the past. So, consider myself lucky to be counted in that group. But yeah, this was fun. This was awesome. And happy to do it again in the future, if you like. So it's been great.
Yeah, we'll need to, because there's so many things to talk about. We've scratched the surface on a few of these things. We could spend. That's my whole trouble, right? Is like we scratch the surface. I'm like, oh, that's a whole episode right there. We could go down, and that's another one. So it's all about picking the battles. But brilliant, man.
Yeah.
And for those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes front and back over here, then share this with someone else. 1 person, 3 people, 9,000 people, whatever the number is. That's thought leadership. Good information into other people's hands. And with that, Tony, thanks again, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Casey. Take care.
All right, everyone. This has been another crazy episode of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will see you all next time.